Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and this is Let's Live with Thurman Greco coming to you from Television Woodstock, Channel 23, Educational Television, and also from YouTube. And as always, we have a wonderful guest this evening, and we are going to be talking about some very, very interesting things that are unique to Woodstock. So will you begin by telling us your name and introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Tamara Cooper, and I'm the team leader of training and staff development and the Woodstock hotline for Family of Woodstock. I've been there for almost 30 years and love the job and the agency.
Okay. So have you always been with the hotline for 30 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Really?
I started as a volunteer
No kidding.
and moved my way up.
Well, now, if you were the volunteer,
Mm-hmm.
has the hotline always been a hotline?
Yes, it has. And the new additions are the text line, of course. Back 30 years ago, we didn't do texting, many changes. It has always had the same flavor, though, the same philosophical underpinnings, and I think the same heart.
And I understand now that it is a warm line and a hot line. Tell me about that.
Well, our 52 years ago, when we originated, one of our mottos was any problem under the sun. And any problem under the sun means call us and we will talk with you. The warm line system in the United States is more emotional support. However, we are in a pandemic of loneliness and solitude and isolation and under-resourced. So in the United States, the warm line system has kind of grown and exploded over the last few years. So services like ours that really were developed as connections for communities and emergency support and crisis have now also been morphed into warm lines. That's a little difficult for us. Our call volume is up 40% over the last 2 years at a time when we have fewer people answering the phones and fewer resources in our communities, our state, our country, our world. So this is an ongoing evolution, I think, or an emergence of what's going to happen next as far as resourcing our communities and doing it in a way that helps people connect. So the warm line system overloaded in the United States, so people call all the various warm lines from all over the United States for connection. And connection is a really important human need. The problem is there are more people reaching out than there are services to be of assistance. So that's what we're challenged by and balancing right now.
So what you have just said is that we offer these phone calls, we answer these phone calls, but you need more people to pick up the phone?
We need more people to pick up the phones, yeah.
Really?
We do, yeah.
If somebody wants to volunteer at Family, how do they do that?
They can either email us at Family of Woodstock, or they can call the hotline 845-679-2485, and we will take their name and their contact information and get a hold of them when we put together our next training schedule, which will be sometime over the summer.
How many times a year do you have a training session?
For the hotline in Woodstock, we usually have 2 or 3 a year, and all the agency goes through the same training, agency basic training. So these trainings happen more frequently than 2 or 3 times a year, and we can plug people in when we're training other staff as well. The Kingston staff, New Paltz staff, Ellenville staff, our whole agency takes the same basic training, which is a really nice way to keep cohesion within the agency.
So what you're telling me is we've got Family of Woodstock, but Family of Woodstock is in reality Family of
Woodstock.
And what about Ellenville and New Paltz?
So this is a confusion.
Okay.
We actually started across the street and down the road in the early 70s. And that was the original Family of Woodstock, which was just originally somebody's apartment who said, if you pay for my phone line, I will answer the calls and I will have someone come into my house when I have to go grocery shopping. So from that very fundamental basis has grown a multi-county human services agency that is called Family of Woodstock. So there's Family of Woodstock, the program, and Family of Woodstock, the agency. The agency has about 20 different programs within it.
And what are some of those programs?
We have 2 other hotlines, one in Ellenville and one in New Paltz. That's Family of Ellenville, Family of New Paltz, part of Family of Woodstock, the agency. We have 2 homeless shelters, one for families and one for singles. We have Family House, which is for youth, respite, or youth who are homeless or runaways can go there and get some services and get connected with adolescent case management, another program we have. We have Midway in 2 places, and Midway is a transitional living program for youth 16 to 21. So those are houses, they can live there up to a year and a half, I think, and they do take parents with very small children. We have adult case management services that's run out of Kingston that does extensive case management for people. We have domestic violence services. We have a shelter. We have groups for people who are perpetrators of domestic violence, both males and females. And we have groups for people who have been the recipients of someone's abusive behavior for support. We have restorative justice program, which is one of my favorites. It's only been around for about 8 years, I think. And it started out as a program for youth going through the judicial system to have a way to restore their connection with their community. One of my favorite stories with that is one of the youth. They get together in a small group and they're asked how they broke their connection with the community, what landed them in trouble, and how they would like to make that up or repay that or mend that broken connection. So this youth decided, this youth had graffitied a bus. And this youth decided that what they would do is ride the bus every day after school and help senior citizens on and off the bus. And it lasted for 3 months. And everybody gathered together again and applauded this young person because of the wonderful job and reparation that had happened. And they said, "What do you mean I'm done? Who will help the senior citizens run off the bus? What do you mean I'm done?" And continued to do it for a few more months. So those are the kind of stories that are generated when communities band together to help themselves and to grow in these kind of ways. These are emergent processes that kind of happen out of people getting together and meeting each other and recognizing needs and meeting those needs. So that was our 180 restorative justice program, which now also includes young adults. It's been extended over the period of time. I know I have forgotten other programs. Childcare for this county and Columbia Green. A lot of issues with childcare right now. There's not enough childcare centers, not enough home care, not enough child support in general for families who have to have 2 working parents. So our Child Care Council does a lot of advocacy, does a lot of the development of child care in this county and Columbia Green. And I don't know, I'm probably forgetting something.
So what you've got, Family of Woodstock is in Ulster County.
Yes.
And now you're talking Columbia Green.
Only for child care.
Only for child care.
Well, we do also have some food security programs that we share with Greene County, which is another recent foray into food security. And we work with the Rondout Valley growers. We have teams that glean food after they have gone through and gotten all of what they think is sellable in the commercial market, and then everything else gets gleaned and given out to the food pantries in this county. And Greene also has a team like that works with us. So we have 2 counties there.
So you also have, now you're talking about food gleaning, but you've also got food pantries.
Yes, we do. We have one in New Paltz, one in Ellenville. The one in Ellenville is very active, and we have one here in Woodstock. Our domestic violence shelter and homeless shelters also have pantries for when people move back out. Housing is the big issue, and so leaving a shelter into housing is a difficult transition right now. Supporting people as they move into some of the housing opportunities is an important part of what we do as well.
Housing seems to me, available housing seems to be a fantasy.
And you can couple that with affordable.
Okay.
Affordable.
So
and
I do have, that's a realistic thing, that there really is just no housing.
A family is involved in 3 projects moving forward to develop housing in Kingston. There's a tiny home project. There's the old Ulster County Jail is going to be turned into housing that will have some supportive assisted living units, as well as case management to help people with wraparound services. And one of the old motels along 28 is also going to be turned into housing.
You know,
It's not quick though.
no,
Those
none
are
of that
a
is,
couple of years away.
yeah,
before.
none of that is quick.
Yeah.
But I still don't, I think in 2 years, if it only takes 2 years to get, them up and going, we're still gonna be as desperate for housing in 2 years as we are now.
Absolutely.
I really feel that. I don't
Yeah.
see anything
Yeah.
letting up. Unless we have an economy that tanks to such a point that we don't have the Airbnb.
And in this town, we're doing a pilot project called Homeshare Woodstock.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about that. That's Family of Woodstock, the program's most recent project. And it is a project to find homes and renters within a 10-mile radius of Woodstock who would like to live together. Someone may need someone in their home, may do it for rent to supplement their income, or may have someone come live with them that can provide services for them. What we are doing is the vetting process, so we're putting the program together, advertising the program, and then matching people. What we know from programs like this in the United States is the more energy goes into a good match, the better the program works. So we're taking our time to build this, and it is a pilot project, being looked at as a pilot project for the whole county, because all of Ulster County, actually all the Hudson Valley, is in a similar housing situation. So how do we as a community work to add additional opportunities for people?
Well, I see that project is doing a couple of things. First of all, it's going to relieve some of the pressure for a roof over somebody's head. Mm-hmm. But second of all, we are an aging community. We are an aging county. Mm-hmm. So is Ellen. This whole area is aging. And whenever I meet somebody, and I'm in that category, you wonder, next week, am I going to be too old to live in my home,
These are real concerns.
So, and it's a real concern for all seniors. Mm-hmm. And so, if you can find somebody to go in a house and help someone, mm-hmm. then this is good.
This is good.
Yeah. So making a good match.
Yeah.
Did you go to, in designing this program, did you go to other places? How did this come
mm-hmm.
about?
We have good contacts with a program in California and Colorado and I believe Vermont. So they are 3 very different programs, and we've looked at all the different configurations that other communities have come up with. Some are solely volunteer run. Others have paid social workers who do the interviewing and the matching. We have a kind of a combination program. What we really learned from them, though, is the upfront work is so important, and that vetting process, really making a good match, because we want this to work and we want people to really look at it as a model that can work for communities. So we need to make sure from the very beginning that we put that kind of energy into it, and that's what we've started doing.
I think that's wonderful. Also, I don't know how, if at all, Family works with RUPCO. Mm-hmm. Every time I drive into Kingston and I drive through Tech City or whatever it's called, and all those empty buildings.
Oh, yeah.
I keep thinking, how many seniors
I
can
know.
stuff in this place?
I know.
You know?
I have that same thought when I drive through there.
Do you really?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing with that, but it's a huge piece of property.
Yes.
I was at the mall the other day, which has only a few stores, and I thought, God, this is a beautiful sunset, and wouldn't this be a nice place to live?
Right. We could just shove all these seniors in there. And today I was thinking, as I drove through the Tech City, I was thinking, you know, there's all these grounds. You could have all these little parkways, and we could all roll our rollators, and we could, the food pantry could come in on such an, I just had all this fantasy here, you know?
Yeah.
So what does it take? I think family has been so good about taking a fantasy such as that and turning it into a, at what point does somebody say, let's make this happen?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I think that creativity is an emergent process that happens out of people being present, people being connected to their own selves and thoughts and ideas, and connected to each other. And that presence, and then the relational container, if you will, creates a creative process that helps these things come to fruition. And we see that in the startups, in the things like the Home Share Project, Family of Woodstock 52 years ago, and then all the different programming that we've added over 52 years. And what makes that happen, what catalyzes that, I'm not quite sure, except it really takes being present, being attuned to yourself, being in relationship with community, and then what emerges from there. So it's like kind of a seed. It's an emergent process.
Yes.
You never know what's going to happen.
And it's unique to family, isn't it?
Well, we like to think so. However, I would say that this is part of being human. This is part of being a human being, present in yourself, attuned to others, and that this is what our species has always done. We started in small tribes, and we've grown from that. I think we carry a lot of trauma forward, and that's not an emergent process. That is a repetitive behavior over and over. And we have to look at what's happened to each of us, what's happened in our ancestral line and that we're heir to genetically, and what happens collectively. And we are going through a lot of collective trauma right now. So we have to look at it on all three levels. And one thing that interests me is how do we build into our communities the capacity to do shared healing from trauma, collective trauma. Trauma often happens in relationships, so the healing power is going to happen in a relationship as well. And how do we do that? I'm very excited about that.
Well, that can happen through the hotline process and the warm line process.
Mm-hmm. How do you see that?
Well, I was volunteering one evening, and there were some calls. I was not involved in the calls, but I heard the calls.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a family. It was a father and a mother and 5 children.
Too much detail, though.
That's too much detail.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think the size has an effect.
So a large family.
Yeah, a large family. Among themselves, in the midst of all of the drama, one parent took the children and went to the housing that was available. And the other one struck out. And I thought, you know, you're having a conniption fit over there, but you really are a family. You really did. You worked it out. It took a bunch of phone calls. But it did work itself through.
Yeah. And that was them.
Yeah.
And that was somebody being on the other end, receiving, relating, thinking with.
Yeah.
And that kind of attention is really one of the building blocks of whatever happens next.
Yeah.
And we have the capacity to do that for each other.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I said that's a good example of things that happen fairly regularly on the hotline, and the warm line. It's like it's a miraculous event Because for me, if you can't explain it, it's a miracle.
Well, it's
you know?
also an emergent process, right?
Yes.
There's one person here answering a phone, there's another person reaching out for help, and we love help-seeking behavior.
Yeah.
We want to reward help-seeking behavior.
Yeah.
And between the two people, relationship, a creative process happens.
Yes.
And that can happen over and over in all kinds of situations. And we watch that all the time.
Yeah. Well, but we not only watch, volunteers not only watch, volunteers participate.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Volunteers help it
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
which takes it out of the realm of miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're helping create this thing,
Yeah.
once you can figure out how it's created, it's not a miracle anymore.
Well, that's a good way to put it. And maybe the miracle is common enough to just be, oh, this is the process that happens.
Yes.
And we are each a part of that.
Yeah.
And how do we tease that apart? I don't know if we can. It's one of those things that you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
You know that process when you see it, and you feel it when you're in it.
Yeah. But it's very common. Maybe it's not, because I haven't been on all of the hotlines. So my experience has been very selective, or very small, I guess. So maybe it doesn't happen, but I think it kind of does. You know, somehow the person on the telephone realizes, okay, we can make this go. You know.
Yeah.
Or we can't make this go.
Yeah.
And if you can make it go, let's go with it. Or that's what I seem to pick up. And people seem to be very, well, this is just very ordinary. This is like crossing the street or something. And of course, it's not very ordinary. It's really very special.
Yeah.
And that's what makes family family. And I'm assuming, and of course that's a terrible word to use, I'm assuming that the other warm lines and hotlines out there have a similar experience.
I would wonder about that myself. I think it is what fuels this work. And there are other hotlines, there are national lines, there's a national text line, and a lot of them use volunteers. And this is very meaningful volunteer work. I don't think it's for everybody, and I think there are so many people that gravitate towards it, that really grow from it, and learn more about connection and about the helping process, and about themselves in that process as well. Sometimes I think it's more about being than it is about doing for another. It's really being able to read someone, receive what they're saying, feel them in that sense, because we have that capacity to feel each other. It's our first language, emotions, and we pick them up from each other, and we can be there with each other in a way that sometimes is hard for people.
And loneliness is such a terrible disease right now.
It's a pandemic, yeah. There are other countries that actually have ministries of loneliness. Canada is one. They recognized it as such a problem that they built into their government a program to look at how to mitigate the loneliness of Canadians.
That's fabulous. When I think about ministries of loneliness, I think about religions. And I think about if a person in this country, if a person is dealing and trying to overcome loneliness, quite often they do have to go to a religious congregation.
Or some kind of group.
Yeah, they do. And of course there are a lot of people that are turned off by that.
A lot of us
So
have been hurt
Canada
by it.
has decided, well, you don't have to be religious.
Right, we're going to figure out how to make this a social program.
Go Canada.
And again, it's a relationship. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I didn't even know about that. Hey, you know, we have support groups now for people with cancer and heart disease and all these other things. What would we call a support group for those who need more companionship?
They need more connection in some way, yeah.
Yeah, that's a need.
It is a need. It really is. We have human needs for connection.
Well, every time a volunteer picks up a phone call at Family, there is a person at the other end of the line who does need connection.
Yeah.
And if they didn't need connection, they wouldn't call.
That's right. We can bet that that's the underlying need.
Yeah.
That either whatever they're challenged by in that moment isn't something they can share with the people they know. We're a society that induces shame in each other, and that's really hard.
Yeah.
To reach out. And sometimes calling someone you don't know is an easier way to connect around difficult situations. And some of us just don't have enough connection for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So calling someone who's a warm, receptive, friendly voice on the other end of the line can help with some of that.
And most of the time, the person that you're talking to is going to connect with you in some way.
Most of the time.
There are very few dud calls.
Yeah.
Which is good.
It is good. And I think there is a lot of connection. And it is what has kept Family, the hotline, and Ellenville and New Paltz alive all these years, is just the power of humans connecting with humans and what can come from that.
So we have, in Woodstock, we have this 24-hour phone situation, which is in the daytime, it's a person and then ideally two people. And then at night, it's one person.
Yeah.
So what happens in Ellenville and New Paltz? How many people do they have?
They have fewer people than us, and they're a Monday through Friday service.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they're 9 to 5, and their phones roll over to us in the evenings, weekends, and holidays. So we are the hub for the hotline system in the county. We also operate as emergency services for lots of other organizations and agencies.
Really? So I did not realize that was such a teeny group down the road. Well, first of all, I didn't even realize it was there. So it's really bigger than what I thought. And there are a lot of social workers filtering in and out there as well.
We do have an increasing number of social workers, yeah.
That are just showing, it seems to me they're just showing up.
Are you talking about the interns?
I suppose I'm talking about the interns and as well as other volunteers, and I'm sure there are some people on the paid staff somewhere that are social workers. So when I was going through training, it seemed to me that the only non-social worker there was me. And everybody was just falling all over themselves to see how quickly they could get adjusted to Woodstock, that they really wanted to be a part of this. And watching them, I thought at some point, well, now you really want to be a part of this, and is it possible that somebody else might have wanted you, but you preferred Woodstock? I really got this feeling, and I didn't know any of these people, so it had, I had nothing. It just seemed like there were so many. And then, of course, some of them were on internships, and they took off after a while. So we do have a lot of social workers filtering through.
Well, we have social work students, the interns that you referenced. We also have retired social workers, and then in the agency, the larger agency itself, lots of us have gone back to school to get our graduate degrees. I'm one of those who's gotten an LMSW since I've become a Family of Woodstock staff person. And there are others of us as well, and I think I'll have 2 interns in the fall who are working for the agency. So we continue to grow also in the body of professional social work. We couple that with how do communities do this. So there's the profession of social work, and then there's how do communities come together and meet their own needs. How do we identify them? How do we build resource? And how do we capitalize on that? So this is always the balance that Family has had between a more professional outlook and a more human outlook. I don't really like teasing them apart like that, and there is a certain homeliness that goes along with being a Family of Woodstock worker and doing social work within the context of a community.
Well, how did, I am curious now.
Okay.
And you don't have to
You be
answer
curious.
this if you don't want to. In the beginning, back when family was a really small group of people, how did you begin to attract the social workers? Did they just smell it and join up?
In the early years, most social workers were retired and relocating to this area and had the skill set, needed to be oriented to how we did it. And so went through the training. We never said, oh, you're a social worker, you don't have to do our training. Everybody has to do it. We're all on the same page. And so retired social workers were sprinkled throughout the agency, in particular the 3 hotlines. Since maybe the past 2 decades, we've had more and more people who've gone through some kind of human services training, whether a 2-year program, 4-year program, or social workers who want to work within a community context. And so there are lots of ways to be a social worker. Being a social worker embedded in your own community and working with the needs of the community is a special way to do it. And we have attracted people who like that kind of social work, more connected, grassroots kind of social work.
So nowadays, you're going to start a training class in the summer.
Hopefully. I definitely will have one in September. I'm hoping to have at least begin some of the training over this summer.
So you have people approaching.
We have some. We need to advertise for more.
You need to get more.
Yeah.
Where are they going to stay? Where do they come from?
Well, the community does best when they come from the community, you know?
Right.
And I think that we do have people who come from our community. Over the last 3 decades, as we all know, it's been harder to have a family and have a parent that stays home and takes care of the kids and volunteers in the community. That used to be what in the United States people did.
Right.
And so all of the volunteer-based programs are hurting now because it's harder and harder to do that. We are now going through another jump in how difficult that is for people. So yeah, it appeals to a lot of people. Not everybody has enough time. Sometimes micro-volunteering, which is just going to a one-time event to volunteer, is doable for people, and a weekly 3 or 4 hour shift might not be. We do have a lot of people, though, who gravitate towards this work, who take the training, who stay with us, who do whatever they need to adjust. We're also the 24/7 program, so we have evening hours for people to volunteer. We have weekend hours for people to volunteer because we are always there answering the phones.
So, and it takes people from all kinds of walks of life.
It sure does.
So we're talking a lot about social workers, but not everyone is a social worker.
Not everyone is.
All it takes is a person who is interested.
All it takes is a person who's a human being.
Hey, I like that. That's all it takes.
That's all it takes. You're human.
Sign up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
Now, do you have places where people sign up in New Paltz and in Kingston?
Not so much Kingston, although they're working to develop a volunteer program out of Kingston. It won't be the same. It'll be more along the micro-volunteering idea, or specialized things like working in the gardens at the homeless shelter or some other need that one of the programs identifies. New Paltz and Ellenville have smaller staffs, and so they organize their own training and vetting their volunteers and onboarding them the way it works for them. We do share some of the training with them as well.
And Kingston does not have.
Doesn't have a hotline or a volunteer program in the same way that.
That's interesting. What sets Kingston apart?
early on, when it was a long-distance call from Woodstock to Saugerties.
Mm.
These were in the very early years, back in the 70s. Kingston put in a tie line. They said, could we put a tie line into Woodstock, which is why we have 845-338-2370. That Kingston exchange came from those times when Kingston used our hotline and advertised that number so they would not have to have a toll call from Woodstock to Kingston. Now, of course, people call us from Hawaii and don't have a toll, so everything has changed. But that was how we started. That Kingston was kind of in the hub of Family of Woodstock in Woodstock. And our other programming in Kingston is more specialized adult case management services, adolescent services.
Right, we don't have
things.
that. That does not exist, excuse me, in Kingston, does it? And in Woodstock?
In Woodstock, not to the same degree. We do some of that work. We emphasize the supportive piece of case management. Some people know what they need to do, just need someone to help direct them and maybe help guide them through some things. Other people have a lot of challenges and barriers to what they need to do or what might be helpful to them, and that takes a lot of support. So that's what we focus on in Woodstock. Also the people who maybe can't get to Kingston because of transportation or money and cost of gasoline and all those different things.
Excuse me. Well, so, but the shelters and things are out of Kingston?
The homeless shelters, yeah.
Okay. So here, it's mostly the hotlines.
Yes, and the text line, and we do have a food pantry. We have my favorite, the free store. It was one of the things people missed the most during the pandemic, both donating to the free store and using the free store. And our food pantry and phone line and text line.
You know, the free store, to me, is very unique, and it was missed.
Mm-hmm.
During the time when the first part of the pandemic came and we didn't know what was happening, people would say, well, you can't get there.
Yeah.
You can't get in.
Yeah.
But it's open now, isn't it?
It is. We have the ability for people to come in. We have a challenging situation in Woodstock. We have people who want to volunteer and staff who are paid to come and work. And we have to cover the phones 24/7 as part of our contracts with lots of different funders. And we have to provide enough emotional and psychological and physical safety during a time of community spread of a disease. So in order to make sure we have enough people to run the hotline, to answer the phones and text line, we had to shut down some of our other services or put them on pause. I really like that term. We put them on pause. We assumed that pause was not going to be 2.25 years. Nobody knew we would still be in this place this long after the beginning of this. And we will transition back to being more open when we can continue to manage that balance of safety and challenge. And it's a big balance for us.
Well, this is a daily shift.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, what's okay today is not okay tomorrow. I don't think. I mean, that's my take on it.
We, early on, realized we had to be adaptable and flexible and be able to pivot quickly in order to provide enough emotional and psychological safety to have people there, to be there for others who needed emotional and psychological support. So this is the kind of flexible, adaptable, pivoting system that we've come up with. And so we don't know which way we're going to pivot because it all depends on the factors of contagion, of whatever else it is that's coming at us at that time, plus making sure we have enough people to answer the phones, and that's been challenging.
Because you have to, the phones have got to be, you know, no matter what. Well, you know, sometimes I think, of course, we didn't know what was happening when the pandemic hit, and now it's coming out. We never really quite figured out what was happening because, well, whatever, for whatever reason. But my feeling is that we have, as a country, been living in this bubble. I know that when I lived in Mexico, a lot of disease, and when I lived in Venezuela, both, there were diseases there. They were there, just like coronavirus is now. I mean, they were just sitting on your, you know, right there, right there. So you were very aware, you know. So here in this country, we kind of had this bubble where everybody got their shots to get in the first grade or whatever. And then, of course, as we approached adulthood, there were a lot of people who never got injections. So, but we didn't really realize that disease is just perched right there. And so now, for me, I have the same feeling that I had when I was in Venezuela and in Mexico. It's all just sitting right there waiting, you know. You're never gonna, I don't think, for the way I feel now, I don't think we're gonna get away from the disease.
That
You
may
know?
be. Yeah.
We never got, you know, it's like yellow fever, dengue fever. I know my husband, my first husband in Venezuela, went to a party and he came home, we came home, and the next day he was hungover like you couldn't believe. It was like the drunk of this decade. That went on for about 3 days, and finally I said, there's something wrong. And we got him to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, you don't have a hangover, you have dengue fever. And you know, the same thing with typhoid. I mean, typhoid is right there. So balancing this daily.
Yeah. And we all have different risk assessments. We all
Right.
do.
Right.
And that's okay. You know, I have type 2 diabetes, so I'm very careful.
Right.
I'm a little nervous sitting here this long without a mask on, to be honest.
Right.
Because that's the level that I take my health.
That's
I'm
where
also
you are.
someone who's had chickenpox as a child and shingles twice as an adult because that virus still lives in my body.
Right.
So I'm also concerned about if I were to have coronavirus, what
What
might happen in
what
the
would
future.
come up? Yeah.
Yeah. So we all are going to do this in the way that fits us, hopefully. We'll
Yeah.
all feel safe enough to say, no, this is a risk I don't want to take. And when we look at a program of people that depends on lots of people showing up and feeling safe enough to show up to provide an essential service, we have to balance all that. So yeah, it's probably going to be with us for a long time.
Yeah.
And the need to have human beings there to answer the phone is also going to be with us for a long
Right.
time.
That's going to be there too.
And those of us who are salaried employees can't work 24/7 for 7 days a week.
Right.
And if someone calls out because they're sick, somebody's got to be there.
Right.
So these are the challenges that we have to be flexible and adaptable and pivot one way or another based on what are the resources and what can we provide.
Right.
And it doesn't meet everybody's needs. Not everybody's happy with the way we have managed this. And I take a lot of responsibility for the way we've managed it. And I think having a program through this whole 2.25 years that has a lot of volunteer energy, and we've been able to pull it off, well, that might be a miracle right there.
Miracles are among us.
Yes, they are, just like the disease, I don't know.
Yes.
But yeah, we have, this is what we're all doing, and this is us moving forward.
Yeah. And you know, you can think that you have done all that you've done. I know I got a rash because I used so much,
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
And you can, that's just going to happen. And then everybody, of course, goes home, and who knows, the cousin Fred, the spouse,
Right.
the
We have
kids.
more people out with COVID now in the last
Really?
the last 2 months than we had the whole 2 years prior to that.
Really?
And part of that's because it's opened up. The issue, bottom line issue for me, though, is that when people are sick and can't work, someone has to be there instead.
Right.
So how do we manage that ever-present need for having people on site and answering the phones and not burning everybody out? So back to do we have enough people answering the phones? No.
Wow. So if somebody would like to connect with their community,
Yep.
who do they call?
Ghostbusters comes right to me. Family of Woodstock, 845-679-2485.
That's great.
Yeah.
And nobody cares what your education level is.
We care that you have the experience of being human and you can connect to yourself and other people.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in Woodstock, that kind of goes with the turf.
It is a unique community of people that it's again, people who have great ideas, have presence, have the ability to move those forwards, relate to each other, and what comes from that, what comes from those kinds of connections can be really amazing. And Family of Woodstock is an example of that. And it's grown to a multi-service, large agency, and does amazing things, I think.
Has anybody written about Family of Woodstock?
Some people have tried, and there have been a few attempts at documentaries. I think we really need something. Most of us who are in leadership positions, though, are kind of...
Not gonna.
Right.
Well, to write a book takes a lot.
Yeah.
My first book took 10 years. And the last one is going to take a year. But that's a lot. I mean, you write a book one word at a time.
I can't imagine.
It's just not. But it deserves a book.
Well, it is a good story.
Let's put it out to the universe.
All right.
And see what we can come up with. What are some future needs? I know right now coronavirus is one. Controlling the coronavirus, getting that down. What's the next? What's coming up?
I can tell you what I'm interested in.
Okay.
And that is how we as communities build in the capacity to heal from collective trauma. That's our own individual traumas. We have them. All of us have them. We have legacy traumas that are passed on, and the study of epigenetics and other things is really pointing to how that's carried on and passed on through the generation, those legacies. And then we have collective traumas that we go through. And we have a lot of collective traumas happening right now. We have the emergence of some of the social traumas that people have come through. And we're not being asked to look at those anymore. It's being required of us. We have to look at sexism. We have to look at racism. We have to look at the impact of the very violent class system and heal from those. And those are things that all of us have kind of a scripted piece in. The narrative's out there, we're born into the narrative. Nobody said, do you want this role? Really exciting piece for you. Nobody asked us.
Yeah, you may not like it, but here it is.
But here it is, it's yours, because by virtue of whatever. So we have to undo a lot of that. And that's going to take courage, and it's going to take presence, and it's going to take good, solid, healthy relationships. And what emerges from that, I think is going to be beautiful. And I like to think of this as the Boyle theory of healing. When the body has a lot of infection in it or toxicity, it kind of comes to the surface, and all these other healing elements kind of circle around it and marshal their forces and push something up, and it's usually hot and large and ugly and painful, and then when it breaks, there's healing. And I think we're kind of in the Boyle theory right now as a culture, that a lot of stuff's coming to a head, and things are hot.
It's all coming up.
Yep.
Every bit of it.
Yeah.
There's everywhere. Today, especially, everything came up today.
Yeah. Today was a big day.
Yeah.
No matter where you find yourself on this continuum, today is a big day.
Yeah.
People have very strong opinions, and we have a culture of dismissal of some portion of our culture based on gender, based on skin color, based on where you were born, based on how much money you were born into, not choices. Nobody said, Thurman, do you want 2 arms in this life, or would you like ears that hear? You're just born into this stuff. And ridding ourselves of it is going to take time and patience and courage and curiosity. And I'm excited about our capacity to do that. And there are people who are working on how we do these things. How do we collectively heal from trauma? And I'm excited that family can be a part of that as well. Our hotline maybe can be transformed somewhat, just maybe some nuanced changes in how people can recognize that they're in repetitive trauma reenactment and free themselves from that with another person's active attention.
Well, people are in, I'm not going to say repetitive, but I'm going to say they're in habitual.
What's the difference?
Repetitive is very generic about the cause. Habitual, you're playing a part. You know, you're a habitual smoker, you know. That's your, you know, you light up a cigarette. So we do run across, we have a lot of that. But the repetitive part is just there. I mean, like today, women 50 years from today are going to remember today, you know. And so that's a little bit different from habitual. So, yeah, okay. Are there any support groups out there? Is it too soon for support groups?
That's what's going to emerge from looking at this in this kind of way. And there are a lot of people. Thomas Hubel is someone who works on collective trauma healing and has groups that meet worldwide. He has a community call, and that happens periodically, and anybody can join in with that and hear people from all over the world gathered around a particular trauma issue. There are lots of researchers in the field, Bessel van der Kolk, Tara Brach, other people who look at what are the impacts of trauma on us and how do we recognize them. How do we recognize when we're overwhelmed? That's a trauma response or reaction. Or saying, I can't do this. Or what are the things that are tells, if you will, that overwhelmed? And how do I accept that part of me back in? You know, a lot of our traumas happened when we were little, when we really were overwhelmed and we really didn't have options. And we carry those behaviors and thoughts and feelings forward into the future. Now we're adult women. We have other choices than when we were little girls. And sometimes we're back in that little girl place. And I think that's true of all of us, not just women. So how do we work with that? How do we recognize it? How do we see it as a brilliant solution for pro-survival behavior when we were little? That kept us alive. Not so useful now. So how do we reincorporate that back into the whole of our beings so that we can be who we fully are? I really am thinking about self-liberation as the way we liberate everything. If I can liberate myself from the scripts that were foisted upon me at birth, I didn't choose them. They were there, we're contextual learners, I soaked that stuff up, it's what our species did. Now how do I unlearn all that so that I can be me, the real me, who can come up with all kinds of interesting ways to interact with people in the present that aren't scripted from the past or aren't dependent on some kind of narrative that I was born into. So yeah, I'm not quite sure how this is going to go. It's exciting to think about, and for me it's exciting to know that other people alive at the same time we are thinking about it.
You know, obviously you thought about this a lot. And this is good, because in my own mind, not with the sophistication that you have, I should have taken that course, but I didn't. I feel that sometimes the traumas that we have as children provide us the tools that we need to get along as adults. You know? There are young people now whose parents are able to provide them with this almost mystical childhood, and then when the time comes for them to launch, they can't launch because they didn't have anything. They never stubbed their toes.
Oh, you're talking about those kinds of things. As like life challenges.
Yeah.
And how we grow from those.
Yeah.
For me, that's different than, I was molested as a child. that kind of trauma reaction is usually collapse and submit, or please and appease others, or totally shut down. But growth happens when we're challenged, and we balance safety and challenge. So we want to give ourselves, each other, and our children safe containers to explore, to make mistakes in, to not feel shamed by, to grow from. And that for me is different from the kind of trauma that I think I'm talking about. Collapse and submit, I don't like that one at all. And it's very pro-survival. If you grow up in a culture where you fight too hard, you risk death. If you collapse and submit, you stay alive to live another day. And how does that then dominate us as we age? That's what I'm talking about. How do we take those pieces back and put them back into the whole where they can live again? Because split off parts of trauma, they're like shadows. They don't live, they just pop up. And they impact us in our present time life. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I'm thinking this stuff through, so thanks for listening.
Well, we have to overcome things.
Absolutely.
It's like, we're down to 4 minutes. We're down to 4 minutes. It's like, to get into adulthood, you have to go through the bushes with the thorns. And for example, these children in the Ukraine,
Yeah.
and I remember World War II, so I remember that kind of trauma.
Yeah.
And of course now, for me, trauma is living with the person in your family who is on drugs.
That can be traumatic.
Yes. And it is, as you said, it's something that you cannot escape without running away. And people do run away still.
You take it with you.
Yeah.
You don't run away.
You don't. You can hide.
That's the kind of healing I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You can't run away from this stuff.
So listen, we're down to less than 4 minutes. I want to thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
And listen, Ellen, it was fabulous. It was totally fabulous.
You guys are fabulous.
If somebody would like to join family, how could they not want to join family after this conversation?
Oh my gosh.
But if somebody would like to join family, can we tell them one more time or two how to
Yeah.
do it?
You can call 845-679-2485 24/7 and let someone know that you're interested in volunteering with us. They'll ask you for your name, an email account, because that's a good way for us to keep in touch. And we will let you know when our next training series is. It's a great training series. It's about 40 hours, and it runs the gamut from listening skills, relationship building, how to work with someone who's in a DV, IPV situation, suicide prevention, youth and adult mental health first aid, imminent risk and safe planning. We just have a lot of really good information that goes into the training that then prepares people for any kind of call that came in. And I have had a call, we talked about any problem under the sun. I took a call once that was, how do you spell meringue? Had to look it up because I don't know how to spell meringue. And I've had active suicide calls, so it runs the gamut as a community-based resource for people. And the skills that you learn there deepen your sense of self and the connections you have with others. And it's a great group of people who work really well together in very meaningful work.
Also, I want to say that if you want to call, if you think you're interested and you're not sure you can get it together, go ahead and do it. Because it took me 3 years to get from volunteering to actually going through the training, because the universe just didn't give me the space, or I felt like I didn't have, whatever. So once you're in, so go ahead and give them your name and your email, and then you can be a part of the process, and maybe you can do part of the training and then part of the training.
Yeah,
You know?
we have had people that do that.
And you don't have to be available full time. I'm living proof of that. And thank you so very much.
You are
It's
very
been
welcome.
such a pleasure. And thank you, Miss Ellen. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. And we look forward to having another visitor from Family soon.
Yeah.
And everybody be sure, now you're going to be on the carousel now several times a day for the next week. And then
Okay.
yes, and then you go into YouTube.
YouTube. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you very much, dear.